Have you ever done something kind for a stranger without expecting anything in return? I did. Just a small gesture, fixing a young soldier's worn-out boots for free. Little did I know that this simple act of kindness would change my life forever. Those boots would lead to military helicopters landing right outside my small workshop weeks later. Stay with me to discover how a pair of boots connected me to one of the most elite military units in the world and taught me the true meaning of service and honor. Welcome to Honor Echoes, where we share extraordinary stories of veterans and the civilians whose lives they've touched. If you want to hear more incredible stories about how small acts of kindness can lead to life-changing moments, subscribe to our channel now and hit that notification bell. You'll never look at a veteran the same way again. I've been a cobbler for over 30 years now. My little workshop sits on the edge of a small town in Kentucky, the same building my father worked in before me, and his father before him. 3 generations of our family have breathed life back into worn leather, mended broken soles, and listened to the stories that walk through our door with each pair of shoes. Most days blend together in a comfortable rhythm, the smell of leather and polish, the mechanical whir of my stitching machine, the gentle tap of my hammer. I've fixed shoes for just about everyone in this town. From the mayor's polished Oxfords to little Sally Jenkins' first pair of school shoes that her brothers had worn before her. But there's one particular Tuesday in October that stands out from all the rest. The wind had picked up that morning, sending fallen leaves dancing across my storefront window. Business was slow, as it often is midweek. I was hunched over my workbench, replacing the heel on Mrs. Davenport's favorite pumps, when the bell above my door jingled. I looked up to see a young man standing there. Couldn't have been more than 25. He was tall, lean, with a military haircut and the straight posture that comes from service. But what caught my eye were his boots, standard-issue military combat boots that had clearly seen better days. "Morning," I said, setting aside my work. "What can I do for you today?" He approached the counter, somewhat hesitantly. "Sir, I was wondering if you could help me with these." He gestured down to his boots. "The sole is coming loose, and I've got deployment in 3 days. Don't have time to requisition new ones." I gestured for him to take a seat on the small bench by the wall. "Let me take a look." He sat down and removed his boots. They were in worse shape than I initially thought. The sole was indeed separating from the upper on both boots. The leather was cracked in places, and the stitching had given way along one side. These weren't just worn, these boots had marched through hell and back. "These have seen some miles," I commented, turning them over in my hands. The young man, he introduced himself as Private Michael Harris, nodded. "Afghanistan. 2 tours." There was something in his voice, a weariness that didn't match his young face. I'd heard that tone before, in my own father's voice when he'd talk about Vietnam. It was the sound of someone who'd seen things that most of us couldn't imagine. I examined the boots more closely. "I can fix these, resole them, restitch this section, treat the leather. They'll be good as new. Well, almost." "How much will it be?" he asked, reaching for his wallet. I could see the concern in his eyes, doing mental calculations. I thought about my own son, who had served in the Marine Corps for 4 years. I thought about the men and women who put their lives on the line, who walked miles in boots just like these, carrying burdens both physical and invisible. "No charge," I said, surprising even myself. "Sir, I can't let you do that," he protested, but I waved him off. "Consider it a thank you for your service. My son was a Marine. I know what those boots mean to you." Reluctantly, he accepted. We chatted while I took down his information. He told me he was heading back for his 3rd deployment with the 75th Ranger Regiment. I didn't know much about military units, but I knew enough to understand that the Rangers were elite soldiers, often sent into the most dangerous situations. "I'll have these ready by tomorrow afternoon," I promised. After he left, I set aside my other projects. These boots deserved my full attention. I stayed late that night, carefully removing the old soles, treating the leather with conditioner, reinforcing the weakened areas, and attaching new, high-quality soles that would withstand whatever terrain he might encounter. As I worked, I thought about where these boots had been. The mountains of Afghanistan, the dust and heat, the danger. I thought about the young man walking miles in them, carrying not just his pack, but the weight of his duty. By the time I finished, it was well past midnight. The next day, Private Harris returned to pick up his boots. When I handed them to him, his face lit up. "Sir, these look almost new." He turned them over in his hands, examining my work. "They're still your boots," I assured him, "just with a bit more life in them now." He tried them on, lacing them up with practiced efficiency. Perfect fit, even better than before. He stood and took a few steps, nodding with approval. "I can't thank you enough. Just come back safe," I told him. "That's thanks enough." He extended his hand and we shook. His grip was firm, his eyes sincere. "I won't forget this." I nodded, a bit embarrassed by his gratitude. It was just a pair of boots, after all. "Good luck out there." And with that, he was gone. Another customer through my door, another pair of shoes fixed. Or so I thought. Life returned to its normal rhythm. Fall turned to winter. I fixed countless shoes, boots, and the occasional handbag. Private Harris and his boots faded from my mind, replaced by the daily concerns of running my small business and taking care of my family. Then came a Wednesday in January, the coldest day of the year so far. Snow had fallen the night before, covering our town in a pristine white blanket. I'd trudged to my shop early, fired up the old heater, and settled in for what I expected to be a quiet day. Who goes out for shoe repairs in this weather? Around 11 in the morning, I heard it, a rhythmic thumping sound that seemed to make the very air vibrate. At first, I thought it was snow falling from the roof, but it grew louder, more insistent. The small bell on my door began to jingle without anyone touching it. I stepped outside, squinting against the bright snow, and my jaw dropped. There, descending into the empty field behind my workshop, were two military helicopters, massive Black Hawks with their rotors whipping the snow into a frenzy. A small crowd began to gather as the first helicopter landed. The door slid open, and out stepped several men in uniform. Leading them was a face I recognized. Older now, with new lines around his eyes, but unmistakably Private Harris. Except the insignia on his uniform had changed. He strode toward me, his boots, the same boots I'd repaired, leaving crisp prints in the snow. Behind him, his companions carried large cases and bags. "Mr. Johnson," he called out, breaking into a wide smile. "Told you I wouldn't forget." I stood there, speechless, as he reached me and extended his hand. We shook, and he pulled me into a quick, firm embrace. "What is all this?" I finally managed to ask, gesturing to the helicopters, the men, the equipment. "This," he said, "is a very long story. Can we come inside?" I led them into my workshop, which suddenly seemed very small with 8 military men filling the space. Private Harris, who introduced himself now as Staff Sergeant Harris, explained that after his deployment, he'd been selected for special assignment with a unit that provided support for high-ranking officials and diplomats in conflict zones. "Those boots you fixed for me," he said, pointing down at his feet. "They walked me through some of the toughest missions of my career. Never failed me once." His commanding officer, a stern-faced colonel, stepped forward. "Sergeant Harris told us about your generosity. Small acts of kindness like yours make a difference to our troops in ways civilians rarely see." I shrugged, embarrassed by the attention. It was just a pair of boots. The colonel shook his head. It was more than that. It was respect. Support. The kind that doesn't make headlines but matters deeply to the men and women who serve. Then came the real surprise. The cases they'd brought contained specialized equipment, a new stitching machine, tools I'd only seen in catalogs, leather of a quality I couldn't normally afford, and materials for treatments and weatherproofing that were military grade. "We'd like to commission you," the colonel said, "to provide repair services for our unit when we're stateside. These men put hundreds of miles on their boots in conditions you can't imagine. They need someone who understands the importance of reliable footwear." I was stunned. "I'm just a small-town cobbler," I protested. Staff Sergeant Harris laughed. "That's exactly why we're here. You treated a private's boots with the same care you'd give to anyone else's. That means something." What followed was something I could never have imagined. They set up the new equipment in my workshop, provided training on techniques developed specifically for military gear, and even helped renovate my storefront. Within weeks, my little shop had become a specialized repair center for military footwear. Word spread among military personnel stationed nearby. Soon, I was receiving packages from soldiers deployed overseas, boots that had walked through deserts, mountains, and jungles, each pair with its own story. I repaired them all with the same care I'd given to Staff Sergeant Harris's boots that October day. My business transformed. I still served my local customers, still fixed Mrs. Davenport's pumps and little Sally Jenkins' school shoes. But now my small workshop had a greater purpose. I became known as the Soldier's Cobbler, a title I wear with more pride than any official designation. But the most meaningful change wasn't in my business. It was in the connections I formed with the men and women who served. Each pair of boots came with a story, sometimes shared in letters, sometimes told in person when they returned. I became a keeper of these stories, a civilian connection to the world they'd left behind. One particular pair stands out in my memory. They arrived in a package from Afghanistan, so worn that at first I wasn't sure they could be saved. The note attached simply read, "These belonged to my best friend. He didn't make it home. If you can fix them, I'd like to give them to his son when he's old enough." I spent 3 days on those boots, working into the night, using every technique I knew, and some I developed just for this task. When I finished, they weren't just repaired. They were preserved, a legacy to be passed down. The letter I received in thanks brought me to tears. Staff Sergeant Harris visits whenever he's in the area. He's a captain now, with new responsibilities and the same steadfast character. He still wears boots I've repaired, though not the original pair. Those, he told me, he keeps in a special place to remember where his journey took an unexpected turn. The helicopters have landed twice more over the years, once to deliver specialized equipment for a rush job for troops about to deploy, and once because a general wanted to meet the cobbler who had gained such a reputation among his men. My workshop has become something of a gathering place for veterans in our town. They come for repairs, yes, but also for coffee and conversation. The walls are lined with patches, photos, and mementos given to me by grateful service members. Each one represents a connection, a story, a life touched by my humble work. I never set out to become part of the military community. I never expected my small act of kindness to ripple outward the way it did. I was just a cobbler who fixed a soldier's boots for free. But here's what I've learned. Kindness creates connections in ways we can never predict. When we give without expectation, we often receive blessings beyond measure. Not always in the form of helicopters landing at our doorstep, though that certainly makes for a good story, but in the form of purpose, community, and meaning. Every morning when I open my shop, I think about that October day when Private Harris walked through my door. I think about how easy it would have been to simply quote him a price, fix his boots, and send him on his way. How differently things might have turned out if I'd made a different choice. Instead, I chose kindness. And kindness, it turns out, has a way of coming back around. Now, when people ask me about the military patches on my wall or the story behind the soldier's cobbler, I tell them about worn boots and helicopter landings. But more importantly, I tell them about the power of small acts of service, about how fixing a stranger's shoes can lead to fixing something much bigger, a connection between civilians and those who serve, a bridge between two worlds that too often remain separate. I'm still just a cobbler. My hands still get dirty with polish and glue. I still spend my days hunched over worn shoes, breathing new life into them. But now, with each pair I repair, I'm conscious of the journey they'll take, the ground they'll cover, the person they'll carry forward. And sometimes, on quiet afternoons when the shop is empty, I find myself listening for the distant thump of helicopter blades, a reminder that in this world, no act of kindness, however small, is ever truly lost. That's the power of kindness. You never know how far-reaching one small act can be. If this story touched your heart, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our Honor Echoes community. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced an unexpected blessing from a simple act of kindness? And if you want to hear another powerful story about veterans changing lives, check out the video pinned in the first comment. Until next time, remember that the smallest gestures often leave the deepest impressions.